Before we begin our program, I want to invite to the platform Mr. Moses Washington, class of 19, a senior student member of the Board of Trustees, who has an important announcement to make.
Good morning. My name is Moses Washington, and I serve as one of your student trustees along with Cameron Rollins and Lanier Norwood Jr. I come here today to let you know that the SGA and trustees have been working very hard on your behalf. But with that said, we need your input and support in order to continue. In your emails, you should have received a student trustee survey. It is very imperative that you take the time and fill that survey out. We take the data from that survey and use it to report out to the Board of Trustees and to also help make decisions as we continue to thrive to make Morehouse College better for you all. So please take the time and fill that survey out for us. Also, I want to let you know about two more things coming up. In the following weeks, you will be receiving the Morehouse College Student Government Association midterm report. Inside of that report, you will see the details of all the projects that we have been working on. Also, on January 31st, there will be a Morehouse versus Casa rivalry basketball game. Make sure to go out and support both of the teams, root for whoever you think the best organization is, and also just have a good time. And with that said, thank you all for your time.
We also want to announce that on next Tuesday, January 30th, that is the anniversary of the passing of Coretta Scott King as well as Mahatma Gandhi, January 30th. But at 11 o'clock here, our 12th president, Dr. Thomas, is going to hold a town hall meeting. It will be in conjunction with the Freshman Assembly, and all of you are invited. It will be an opportunity for him to address you and for you to have a chance to dialogue with him. Now we're going to have the 30th president of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel Assistants, Mr. Tion DeAndre Holloway of Chicago, class of 18, to come and lead us in our opening prayer. Won't you please rise?
May you all please bow your heads to your hearts and meditate on these words. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Right now we give you all the glory, honor, and praise because you are worthy. You are worthy for the blessings seen and unseen, and you are also worthy for giving us the drum major for justice, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. God, right now as we celebrate the legacy and life of Dr. King, we ask you to do three things. We ask you to let justice roll. Let justice roll all across this country for all black and brown bodies. Let justice roll even on Capitol Hill as we are going through a tumultuous time. God, let justice roll. God, we also ask you to let righteousness run. Let righteousness run for the dreamers who are living a life of uncertainty right now as people on Capitol Hill are unable to come to an agreement on their lives. Let righteousness run even here at Morehouse College as we celebrate our 151st year. And God, we also ask you to let love rise. Let love rise for all persons across the world, be they queer, black, white, brown, yellow, red. We ask you to let love rise and let it be the highest ideal that we all ascribe to. This we pray in your many names. Amen.
Racism and sexism are culturally generated evils. Please turn to the back of your programs. There you see we have listed for you the 13 campaigns Martin Luther King Jr.'s 13 programs for engaging the structures of oppression. In the 12 and a half years that he led the movement, he did so through programs that you see on the back of the program: the Montgomery Bus Boycott, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the sit-ins, the Freedom Rides, the Albany Movement, the Birmingham Movement, the I Have a Dream Challenge to the Nation, the opposition at St. Augustine, Florida, the Selma Movement, the Chicago Freedom Movement, the Vietnam Peace Movement, the Poor People's Campaign, the Memphis Movement. Because this is the 70th anniversary of Gandhi's assassination, we thought we'd list for you there the 8 militant struggles of how Gandhi addressed oppression in South Africa and in India. He led a program to address the structures of racism, colonialism, the caste system. He was for popular democratic participation, against economic exploitation, against the degradation of women, against religious and ethnic supremacy. And he worked on behalf of the nonviolent method for social and political transformation. Both men went international. King said that Jesus led him to Gandhi, and Gandhi said that Hinduism led him to Russia, to Leo Tolstoy, and to England, to John Ruskin. Both went in search of solutions to improve the quality of life for humanity globally. We must continue to do the same. And this is the Morehouse tradition, started by our founder, William Jefferson White, in 1867, though he started in the early 1850s, conducting underground schools to teach the slaves to read and write against the laws of the state of Georgia. We must do no less. We have a serious monetary problem in the United States. We are a debt state. If all of our bills were paid, the American economy would collapse because of the structure created by our banks. This must be addressed if we're going to be totally free one day. And this is the occasion. And now I'm very pleased to bring to the mic Mr. E. Glenn Singleton of South Carolina.
Greetings from South Carolina, Greenville. Black History USA is a calendar brand that highlights past and present community and business leaders inspired by the likes of Johnson Publishing Company, founded in 1942, publisher of Ebony and Jack magazine, and also Black Enterprise magazine, founded in 1970 by Earl Gray Sr., a publication dedicated to African American businesses. Today, January 25th, Black History USA would like to take this time to honor two of our 2018 edition honorees. Before I present our first award, I would like to take a moment to read from a Black Enterprise article dated May 2nd, 2012. The title of the article, Why Black Media Still Matters. There are fewer black films in Hollywood. Television shows with predominantly black casts are all but extinct despite the existence of TV One and BET. Black-owned newspapers, including Black Enterprise, operate with an unforgiving mandate: adapt or die. Why should this matter to you? Because perhaps more than ever, any other Americans, we as black people need our voice to tell our stories. Today, as we celebrate our 10-year anniversary, we would like to recognize two of our 2018 honorees. Our first award goes to the first Dean of Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel, a gatekeeper to the morals, values, and ethics of Morehouse College, an expert in the area of pastoral care and counseling, a world traveler and global citizen. We would like to present, on behalf of Black History USA, our 2018 Leadership Award to Dr. Lawrence E. Carter. Our second award goes to the founder of Hillside International Truth Center. She has appeared as a guest on shows produced by Oprah Winfrey and Tavis Smiley. Her interviews for History Makers is a permanent collection at the Library of Congress. Named by Ebony magazine as one of the spiritual leaders of the 21st century, she has spoken and traveled around the globe. On behalf of Black History USA and American people, we would like to congratulate the recipient of our 2018 Community Award, Bishop Dr. Barbara Lewis King.
It's my privilege this morning to introduce our speaker for this Crown Forum, and that is the Reverend Ernest Andrew Brooke III, who assumed president and CEO of the Academy of Young Preachers, Incorporated in 2017. An ordained Baptist minister, Ernest previously served as the senior pastor of Mount Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church of Winston, North Carolina, and assistant dean of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel here at Morehouse. At Morehouse, Ernest led programs focused on ethical leadership, interfaith engagement, intercultural education, and spiritual development and vocational discernment. Ernest served as the interim chief operating officer of Movement Forward, an organization committed to incubating civil and human rights initiatives that are technologically innovative. Ernest earned a Bachelor of Arts in Religion from Morehouse College, a Master of Divinity from Duke University Divinity School, and a Master of Arts with a concentration in Religion, Ethics, and Culture from the University of Chicago's Divinity School. Additionally, Ernest earned a graduate certificate in higher administration from the Graham School and Professional Studies at the University of Chicago. It is my privilege to introduce Mr. Ernest A. Brooks, who will follow the selection of the Glee Club.
Thank you to the Glee Club and Dr. Morrow for that selection, and Dr. Oliver, as always, for his phenomenal music on the organ. We have a treasure here at Morehouse in our Glee Club and our organist and our artistic and musical expression. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you to Donovan for that introduction, and to Tion for your prayer, and to Dean Carter, my mentor now for over 16, almost 17 years, and our spiritual guide here at the college. I thank him for the invitation to come and preach and speak at Crown Forum, the King Crown Forum in particular. As you know, as men of Morehouse, I once sat where you sit, and it was always a goal of my friends and I to be able to return to the college one day to speak at a Crown Forum service. And the King Crown Forum is one of the signature Crown Forums in the college calendar, is a high honor, and that honor is not lost on me this morning. The theme for this year's Crown Forum, reimagining, remixing, and re-engaging the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., offers a host of intellectual and rhetorical possibilities. There are certainly no deficits of circumstantial challenges or issues of justice, righteousness, and equality, or the lack thereof, that must be addressed in our current social and political climate. These issues and challenges are local, national, and global in scope. They are matters of personal integrity and of interpersonal morality. These issues ought to compel us to seriously re-engage the philosophical, theological, sociological, political, ethical, and tactical genius of one of the greatest paradigm-shifting leaders in human history. However, rather than run through a litany of current events and challenges that beset us this morning, and there are many, I'd like to use our time together to re-engage the notion and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a preacher and a public orator. I am fully aware of the fact that this is a Thursday morning Crown Forum academic assembly and not a Sunday morning worship service. However, I would submit that there is no more appropriate place than Morehouse College, and the King Chapel in particular, to consider the enduring legacy of the Black prophetic preaching tradition in which Dr. King was formed and has been lionized as one of its greatest exemplars. Not only was Dr. King a pulpiteer of the first order, he was also a master of the American aspirational democratic oratorical tradition. And he was a singular object lesson in the rhetorical sophistication and elocutionary excellence that serve as the core competencies of a classical liberal arts education, such as the one that students are expected to receive at an institution like Morehouse. As a preacher, rhetorician, and public orator, Dr. King was a master of what we have come to know as the remix. As we seek to re-engage, reimagine, and remix the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I can think of no greater tutor in the art and craft of the remix, or of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis than Dr. King himself. It is my contention that the ability to read the current social scene, to investigate and interrogate the linguistic, cultural, and intellectual assumptions that are operative in our social fabric, and to compellingly and persuasively communicate both the challenges and the opportunities therein, have long been the domain of Morehouse men from 1867 to the present, regardless of one's academic major or area of professional engagement. Whether you are a business finance major with Wall Street ambitions, a biology pre-med major preparing to become a neurosurgeon, or a computer science major intent on creating the successor to Microsoft, Apple, Google, or Facebook, the world expects, no, the world demands that Morehouse men have something to say. And not only that, but that we know how to say it. You see, the world expects Morehouse men to lead in word as well as in deed. There are many institutions that can claim to produce professionals of competence, but Morehouse goes a step further and lays claim to the production of leaders of competence, confidence, conscience, and character. So for the time we have together this morning, I want us to get to know King the preacher, King the thinker, and King the leader. I submit that it is impossible to understand the genius and impact of Dr. King, the deep legacy that served as his spiritual and intellectual foundation, or our continued ability to remix and re-engage his legacy 50 years after his assassination, without spending some time engaging these three aspects of his personal, professional, and public identity. First, King the preacher. Dr. King has been quoted as saying, "In the quiet recesses of my heart, I am fundamentally a clergyman, a Baptist preacher." Yes, we all know that Dr. King's work and legacy transcends the pulpit and the broader landscape of what we define as religious. However, we cannot effectively remember, reclaim, and reimagine the significance of Dr. King's legacy without considering the sermon and the art of public persuasive speech as a vital and necessary tool in our toolkit for social change and the transformation of the public and private domain. Yes, as you heard in my bio, it is my professional role as president of the Academy of Preachers to literally make the case for preaching, as traditionally understood as a vital area of vocational and professional engagement. But this morning, I'm not here just to make the case for preaching as a professional identity. I'm seeking to make the case for an expanded definition of preaching that goes beyond the pulpit and beyond the limited purview of ordained ministry and calls the business person, the sociologist, the historian, the scientist, the educator, the philosopher, and artist of every sort into its orbit of influence and engagement. Dr. King and his co-laborers modeled for us the importance of having a cadre of young women and men, regardless of their background or professional location, who have the courage of spirit, the intellectual preparation, the dexterity of mind, and the cultural competency to literally become agents of righteousness and justice, speaking on behalf of the discouraged, the dismissed, the dispossessed, and the disinherited masses when the spirit of the time calls them into such service. The prophet Isaiah described such a moment of call this way. He said, "I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send and who will go for us?' To which he responded, 'Here I am, send me.'" Similarly, Dr. King recalled, "When I went to Montgomery as a pastor, I had not the slightest idea that I would later become involved in a crisis in which nonviolent resistance would be applicable. I neither started the protest nor suggested it," Dr. King said. "I simply responded to the call of the people for a spokesman." Dr. King was able to respond to that call with courage and conviction, with passion and power because of his preparation. Not only his academic and professional preparation, although these were of paramount importance, but as a result of the centuries of experience, thought, and action of those upon whose shoulders he stood when he rose to the pulpit of the Holt Street Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama on the evening of December 5th, 1955, just 4 days after Rosa Parks sat down. It was at this moment, after years of preparation, yet with only a few hours' notice, that he was thrust into the leadership of the Montgomery Improvement Association, the Montgomery bus boycott, and ultimately the modern American civil rights movement. Dr. King's ability to assume this epoch-defining mantle of leadership was a direct result of his own ability to remix, re-engage, and reimagine the work of those who went before him. His task was to galvanize the hearts and minds of those in front of him and to secure their individual and collective commitment to the sacrificial, dangerous, bloody, and yes, even deadly work of transforming their city, region, nation, and world, not just for their own benefit, but for the benefit of you and I for generations yet unborn. In his introduction to the text, The Radical King, Dr. Cornel West describes King as a product of the Black prophetic tradition, full of fire in his bones, love in his heart, light in his mind, and courage in his soul. The Black prophetic tradition that Dr. West references was evidenced in Dr. King's own home and family through the personages of his father, the Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., his mother, Mrs. Alberta Williams King, and his maternal grandfather, the Reverend A.D. Williams. The Black prophetic tradition literally gave birth to the Augusta Institute in the basement of the Springfield Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia, which in time would become Morehouse College. If this black prophetic tradition of speaking truth to power, of interpreting and applying sacred texts and ideals for the purpose of this worldly liberation, of using one's intellectual and professional resources, not just for one's own livelihood, but for the liberation and livelihood of one's immediate community and the broader human community, was the lifeblood that animated Dr. King's life and work, and I believe that it was, then Morehouse College was certainly one of its major arteries. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the shoulders of William Jefferson White, of Howard Washington Thurman, of James Madison Nabrett, of Charles Thomas Walker, and Mordecai Wyatt Johnson, among others. He carried the torch that was nurtured by John Hope and Benjamin Brawley and Samuel Archer and George Kelsey and Benjamin Elijah Mays. If these names are not names that you recognize, they're names that are in the history and the fabric and the spirit of Morehouse College. They're names that you need to know and understand. They are the forerunners of the Morehouse mystique and the spirit that you now inhabit. The soaring and persuasive resonance of Dr. King's public rhetoric and pulpit preachments cannot be divorced from his educational preparation. Yes, Dr. King was an ordained Baptist minister, but it was not his ordination status that marked him as a preacher in the black prophetic tradition. It was his commitment to using his mind and his voice to speak out and speak up for justice and righteousness. It was his commitment to give voice to the fears and frustrations, the pressures and the pain, the barriers and the burdens, as well as the hopes and dreams, the skills and talents, the dignity and worth of those who lived, as Howard Thurman described, with their backs against the wall. As a preacher in the black prophetic tradition, Dr. King was committed to both removing the wall and strengthening their will not only to survive, but to thrive in the face of bitter hatred and unrelenting dehumanization. King the preacher and King the leader cannot be divorced from King the thinker. As a consummate intellectual, Dr. King was a master of consuming, critiquing, synthesizing, repackaging, and developing ideas and information marshaled from a wide variety of sources. Yes, Dr. King was a master of the remix. He rejected Marxist materialism, totalitarianism, and ethical relativism, but he embraced the power of communalism and its critique on rabid classism and debilitating income stratification. He rejected the liberal idealism and shallow sentimentality of classical pacifism, but he accepted and embraced the power of robust and active nonviolence as an ethical and spiritual lifestyle, as well as an effective force for individual and social change. He rejected Hegel's absolute idealism, but he embraced the ethical ideal of rational coherence and the persuasive rhetorical and intellectual power of the dialectic method. He rejected what he saw as the shallow sentimentality and thin emotionalism of popular religious experience, but he embraced the soul-redeeming and world-transforming power of agape love found in the divine personhood of God and expressed in the life and work of both Jesus and Gandhi. Dr. King was arrested by an idea. He was arrested by an obligation. He was arrested by a call that was larger than any one tradition, any one person, or any one school of thought. In his book, The Preacher King, Richard Lisher makes the point that in his speeches and sermons, King elevated local conflicts into titanic battles of universals. He elevated the movement by clothing it in gorgeous rhetorical appeal and associating it with the most respected themes and thinkers Western civilization has produced. Yes, Dr. King was a master of the remix. This ability to address a very specific concern or issue and situate it in its immediate context, while also appealing to a broader sense of universal spirit or of overarching human concern, is at the heart of the American democratic oratorical tradition. This nexus of the black prophetic preaching tradition of the pulpit and the aspirational democratic idealism of the public square is what social ethicist and religious intellectual historian Gary Dorian has identified as the black social gospel, a centuries-old tradition of fusing deep spiritual piety and public prophetic witness that inextricably links the dual aims of personal liberation and social salvation. The progenitors and animating figures of the black social gospel tradition, of which Dr. King serves as a key exemplar, were not just ministers. They were scholars and university presidents. They were social workers and labor leaders. They were business persons and organizational leaders. They were journalists and artists. They were agriculturalists and scientists, women and men from every conceivable walk of life, who were galvanized both by the injustices of their immediate reality and the compelling vision of a brighter, more hopeful, more just, and more equitable future. No, they were not all orators, thinkers, and leaders of global renown with Nobel Prizes and earned PhDs and a plethora of honorary degrees, but they were all agents of and participants in a grand project of social change and transformation catalyzed by the power of prophetic speech that was then transformed into sustained action and led to a paradigm shift in global consciousness. Finally, King the preacher and King the thinker cannot be divorced from King the leader. As we seek to remix and re-engage the legacy of Dr. King and others in the prophetic tradition, we must remember that what is left unsaid is just as important as what is said. And what is said is often received or rejected according to how it's said. And what is said is often judged worthy or unworthy by virtue of who it is that is saying it. While certainly far from perfect, Dr. King, the leader, knew that King, the preacher and public orator, had to guard against the pitfalls of empty rhetoric and self-serving egotism that can quickly sap one's moral authority and provoke the revocation of one's license to lead. Aristotle, one of Dr. King's most frequently cited philosophical influences, was convinced of the unmatched persuasive power of rhetorical address in the public square, where ideas are debated and the fabric of society is constructed, deconstructed, and reconstructed. However, Aristotle warned that prophetic proclamation is not immune to ethical challenge. In fact, he made the point that the personal character and public reputation of the speaker is as significant a factor in the persuasive success of a speech or a sermon or an address as the words and arguments themselves. In his recently published book, Where the Sacred and Secular Harmonize, Birmingham Mass Meeting Rhetoric and the Prophetic Legacy of the Civil Rights Movement, rhetorical scholar and author David Holmes notes cautiously that preaching and prophesying have been used interchangeably as a way of describing stuck-up diatribes designed to put down anyone and anything that does not fit within a myopic definition of what the religious speaker deems right or wrong. I submit to you this morning that not only is this a fitting indictment, but it is one of the reasons that preaching is no longer in vogue. You see, far too often from the pulpit, whether sacred or secular, we have been using the pulpit and the art of public speech to put people down rather than lift people up, to denigrate, castigate, and condemn rather than lift to a higher plane of love and dignity and mutuality and respect. This is something that King understood. Issues of power and the reification of oppressive ideas and systems are serious threats, even as one seeks to deconstruct and dismantle other areas of oppression, degradation, and destruction. We can't claim moral authority in the 21st century by speaking up on issues of race while dismissing or diminishing the intersectional issues of classism and gender bias and homophobia and xenophobia and nationalism and environmental degradation and all of the other oppressive practices that prevent true human freedom and full human flourishing. We are living in a moment in 2018 in the United States of America when some claim that words, arguments, debates, speeches, sermons don't matter. We are living in a time when divisive Twitter messages and social media posts that spread misinformation and incite fear and hatred are cited as legitimate means of governing and communicating. Some have described this as a post-truth era. But I submit this morning that words matter now more than ever. Words both reflect and inspire. Words can remind us of the worst aspects of ourselves, but they can also call us to embrace and live into our best selves, the highest ideals of humanity and community. Words can hurt, but words can also heal. Words can convict, but words can also liberate. Words can be used to transgress, but words can also be used to transform. Yes, we must speak truth to power, but we must also speak truth in power and from power, not the empty and vacuous power of hate, but the redeeming and renewing power of love. You see, there is still much work to be done. Yes, the canon of great American oratory, including the speeches and sermons of Dr. King and others, are worthy of study and analysis and appreciation. But I believe that God is still calling young women and men to preach a remixed gospel of love and liberation for this present age, like King did in his, until justice runs down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. This is not an argument about religion per se or some vision of salvation in the great by and by when we should all get to heaven and walk around and see Jesus and see this person and that person. No, that isn't the vision that I'm describing. No, this vision of redemption and justice is about salvation and transformation right here, right now. Whether in the pulpit, the boardroom, the legislative chamber, the White House, the artist studio, the scholar's library, or the scientist's laboratory. So, men of Morehouse, women, friends, guests, as we seek to remix, reimagine, and re-engage the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., let us accept the mantle of prophetic leadership in our own time like Dr. King did in his. Let each of us, regardless of our professional domain, commit to preaching a message of life to a dying world that desperately needs to hear words of hope, of salvation, of transformation, and of liberation. When the call is made in 2018 for leaders to stand up for the issues of justice in our day with the same intellect and integrity as Dr. King, I pray that there are some Morehouse men and more than a few women who will be able to stand with us and declare, like Isaiah and like Martin, "Here I am, send me."
We're all grateful to be here this morning, to hear this wonderful address, but we're also very grateful for the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, for they have immortalized our most distinguished alumnus on the National Mall. It's quite something to organize to raise millions of dollars. We've got to do that in an even bigger way to support our historically black colleges. So, as is our custom, I invite the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel Assistants to take the wreath and stand here in front of the orchestra pit, and all the members of Alpha and the chapel assistants to come and get behind Mr. Holloway and Mr. Pinner. as we prepare them to march through the International Hall of Honor to the plaza to place our traditional wreath. And now, when they have cleared the nave, I invite you now to rise. Won't you now join hands for the singing of the college hymn?